Muy buenas noches, yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa y esta es la serie internacional 2013 de Tiempo de Mercadeo. Uno de los consultores más afamados del mundo es John Mariotti. Él acaba de escribir un libro señalando la ruta que deben seguir las organizaciones para crecer de manera rentable y exitosa. Por eso hemos seleccionado el tema de qué se debe hacer en mercadeo con una hoja de ruta como la que John Mariotti nos enseña en su último libro. Esto lo haremos con el autor dentro de unos segundos cuando regresemos. Ya volvemos. John, good evening. Welcome back to my program. It's nice to have you after all these years.
It's a pleasure, isn't it? Time really flies, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's been how many years since we met?
Since we met, probably 10.
Yeah, just about.
You're older now.
Oh, yeah. You're younger.
Yeah, no, not really.
Well, John, you just wrote a book, and let me tell the viewers what the book is. John, what's new in this book? Because you say that whatever you say here is going to save the U.S. economy. How is that going to be?
In the United States, the economy is made up almost 75% of consumer spending, consumption, and corporate spending. And the problem the United States has had, along with a lot of other countries lately, is no growth. When there's no growth, consumers don't spend as much, companies don't spend as much. So if I can help people find profitable growth and show them the way to it, then they can start spending again, and every time they spend, taxes go into the government, the economy grows, the deficit gets smaller. When there's no growth, the reverse happens.
That's easy to say, John, and that's what has been said throughout the years. What's new in this book that hasn't been said yet?
I discovered in working with companies on a consulting basis that their biggest problem, they always told me, was growth, and then as soon as they said it, they'd say profitable growth. So I said to them, let me see if I can help you figure out how to find more profitable growth. Now, if you can do this for one company, 2 companies, 3 companies, 4 companies, and it works every time, then why not thousands of companies? What's new in the book is I pick 4 specific paths that let them go where they'll find growth. And I can explain to you what each of those paths are.
Let's go.
Okay? The first path is companies have to figure out what business they're in. It sounds obvious, but it isn't obvious. It's where do they make their money? Where do people believe that they're good at something? And they should do more of that.
You know who said that in 1961? Ted Levitt said that the problem with the companies, when he talked about the marketing myopia, is that companies didn't know where they were.
You're absolutely right. Levitt said it, and Peter Drucker said it.
Right.
You have to understand what business you're in. There's no difference now, except that now it's more critical than ever, and there's more information available to people than ever, so they can really understand where they make their money and how they make their money if they just know how to look at it.
Okay, and how do they have to look at it?
Okay. That's the first path is figure out what business you're in.
Okay.
Answer the question, what do you want to sell to whom, and why should they buy that from you? Okay?
That's 2 questions.
That's
okay,
2 questions, but that's important. The second question takes me to the second path. Look at where you have been successful.
But let me go back to the first one. Mm-hmm. What business do they want to go into? And who do they want to be? Who do they want to be their customers? 2 questions in one.
Yes.
How do they do that? Do they sit down and say, hey, we want to be this and we want to sell to this? Or how?
My first answer is look at where people have given them money to do things and use that as their guideline. Where people are already buying something from them, that's the first clue that that's probably a place where they are really in that business. Okay. Now, if that's not the business they want to be in, they have a different problem. Because there's a lot of companies that want to be in, they think they're in one thing, but they're really not. They're really in something else. So first we've got to get those aligned. That's why I call the first path in the book strategic alignment. But the best indication of what your business is that you've been successful at is where you're meeting a need that people will pay you for it. And history shows that what they are. If you're good at selling services, what services have they bought from you? That's the business that you're in. You may think you're in something different, but you're not. That's the one you're in. Where do you make your money, which is the second part of that question, helps you fine-tune whether that's a part of the business you like or not. There's some people that do a lot of sales, don't make much money. So you have to figure out both what business you're in, based on what people have bought from you in the past, and where do you make your money within that business? Because assuming we're still around to have this discussion, you must have been making some money somewhere. That's the first path, to get that strategic alignment correct, and to get out of your mind that you're in some businesses you're not really in. So you can focus. You remember I wrote a book called The Complexity Crisis?
Yes, right.
And that's all about focus. So first path is focus and get that strategic alignment right. But what you're looking for next is what the second path is. The second path is to sit down and think, really, realistically think, why you succeeded in the last big deal you made. What was it that you deserved to get the business over some competitor you were going against? What was it about you? Was it your company, your reputation, your product offerings, your price, your program? Why? Why'd you get it?
That applies to a newcomer too?
Applies to anybody, unless you've never done business before. It applies to anybody who's ever done business. You say, why was I successful? Same for a sporting team. Why did I win that game? Same for a political election. Why did I win that election? In business, why were you really successful?
In other words, if you are a newcomer, then you have to look at the old ones, or past companies or past people who have done that, and what they did right and what they did wrong.
And what you're going to do differently
right.
from them. Because newcomers usually come to the place with a different value proposition.
They have to.
They have to. On the other hand, if they wander too far from what the customer thinks is the right value, they'll fail. So they have to start small and determine by actual success that this works. But the key to finding profitable growth is to understanding the business that you are really in, not what you think you're in, and understanding why you win at it when you win at it, and making sure those two match. If you don't match those two, you don't succeed.
Does that mean research, marketing research first?
Research has a role in it, but research can only take you so far. I have a section in the book called The Importance of Information. There's a tremendous amount of information available out there.
More than you need.
But companies that don't use what is available are being foolish. I call it, why fly blind? You wouldn't want to fly an airplane that had no navigational system.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay? Companies do it all the time. They guess. They assume. They just make blind hopes that what's going to work will work. Well, that you can take the information that you have, but until you blend it with the actual experience of a consumer or a customer parting with their hard-earned money to buy what it is you're selling, you haven't got the final confirmation. You just have a theory at that point. You have to get that confirmation. And once you have that, it'll either validate the business you thought you were in, or it will disprove it, and then you have to go back and think again. So the first two paths of this, where I'm going, are dependent on each other. And the hardest thing for people to do, for some reason, is to be honest with themselves.
That's difficult nowadays. But then we're going to have to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back to continue talking, okay?
Good.
Vamos a ir a una serie de comerciales, una tanda de comerciales, y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes y con John Mariotti. Ya volvemos. John, you just mentioned the second path. Let's go to the third one.
The third path is to choose big opportunities. Now, isn't that obvious?
It is.
You would be amazed at how many companies and how many people choose smaller opportunities because they're either easier, or they're afraid of failure, or they don't want to go after the big one, or worst of all, they assume themselves out of competition, as I call it. They assume that this company is in bed with XYZ supplier, or they'll never buy that from me because they never had. They don't even ask. They assume themselves out of competition. So while you're thinking about path 1 and 2, which is what business you're in and why you succeeded, you also have to look for big opportunities that you have not been going after.
The problem here is that most people don't realize or don't recognize or don't identify the opportunities they have.
You are absolutely right. In fact, one of the first things I do when I go into a company on a consulting basis is I say, let's make a who sells, who buys matrix. Let's put across the top who the competitors are, and down the side who the customers are, and let's see if we can fill in who sells how much to who, to whom. You'd be surprised how difficult they have the time. They can't do it. They think they know, but they don't. And if they don't know that, how do they know where the opportunities lie? The information is out there. There's so much information now. Public companies, market research, filings that companies make with the government, import statistics. You may not get it all, but you'd be surprised once you try to fill in that who sells and who buys matrix, which, by the way, is a sample of that in the book. You start thinking about that, and each piece of information you get after that, you're sensitized to it. Human nature is that. If I talk to you about that, you'll start thinking about it. And once you start thinking about it, you start realizing who has the business. And by the way, they're across town probably doing the same thing to your company if you have the business, so you better think about that too.
Absolutely, yeah, sure, that for sure.
But remember now, I'm going to keep going all the way back. First, what business are you in? Secondly, why have you succeeded? And third, who has the business that you really need to get, really want? And figure that out. And if you don't know that, shame on you, you can never set an intelligent target without knowing that.
Okay, now part number 4.
Part number 4. 4 is the interesting one, it's a fun one. Archimedes said, if you give me a lever and a fulcrum, I can move the earth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what, who said that?
Archimedes.
Right.
Greek philosopher. Now, the 4th one is leverage. When you have a success with a good idea, if you can find a little improvement you can make on it, you can often get a disproportionately large return on that. And one of the best examples I can give you is a US company named Procter & Gamble. They came up with a floor duster called a Swiffer. It was a synthetic duster that would collect the dust better than a mop. So you put it on the end of a long handle, dust the floor. But it was not useful for dusting your furniture or your bookcases. So somebody said the idea, aha, but what if we just cut a few little strips in it so that it's floppy and sell a little plastic handle? So now it replaces the old feather duster and it has all the same properties as the floor duster. It took very little additional investment for them to come up with that product. That's a high leverage opportunity. Small input, like the lever, big output. Google does the same thing. If you think about where Google started.
Yeah.
Search, now they keep going over one little thing here. Pretty soon it's Google Plus, then it's Google Words, then it's Google Alerts, and on and on. Incremental ads for big investments. So the 4 paths: figure out the business you're in, understand why you've been successful, go after big opportunities. Even if you miss a big opportunity, if you just get a small piece of it, you got your foot in the door.
Of course.
And go after high leverage opportunities because resources are scarce. Nobody has enough of them. People, time, and money, they're always in short supply. So if you can make a big return on a small resource, have you seen Crocs, these molded plastic shoes that have holes
Yes.
in them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there's a company made some things.
You like them?
Yes, I like them. I wear them a lot. They made some things called gibbets. Gibbets are little plastic buttons that are sized to pop in the holes on the Croc. So you can decorate them. Happy faces, ladybugs, little gremlins. They can put about 200 of these gibbets on a counter card about this big. The Crocs sell for $30. The gibbets sell for $2 or $3 each.
Oh my goodness.
They must have about an 80% gross margin on them. So it's a very, very high leverage opportunity to make a lot of money, because you might sell 4 of them for a pair of Crocs. You know, no self-respecting kid wants to have only one. They got to have 3 or 4.
Sure.
So there's nothing about any of these things that I've said, these 4 paths, that are unique unto themselves. It's the combination of the 4 that is powerful. It's no point going after big targets if you don't know what business you're in. No point going after big targets if you don't know why you've been successful in the past. And how can you possibly go after high leverage opportunities if you don't know where the opportunities are? So combine these 4 and you reach what I call the intersection. And at that intersection is a pile of gold, and it's called profitable growth. And this is designed, it works for the biggest companies. I've tried it up to $1 billion or $2 billion companies. But companies, small companies, it's hugely powerful because there's a lot of market opportunities out there.
Yeah, I would say it is easier for small companies and family companies.
It is easier for them because they have fewer layers of bureaucracy
Absolutely.
that they have to convince. And what they can do is they can think about it, decide on it, and try it. And after they try it, then they can adjust, because they never quite get it right the first time. They can adjust and do it better the next time around. And the key to that is the fewer people that you have to get to agree on why you've been successful, the easier it is to move to the next step.
Okay, let's go to another commercial break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Vamos a ir entonces a otra tanda de comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes. Ya regresamos. In your experience, have you found that it is so difficult?
And it's difficult.
It's difficult or too difficult?
It's difficult to decide what's true because human nature is to practice denial or delusion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So the key is to force people in a non-threatening setting to actually think. And I was speaking earlier when I was off the camera with you about the group of 15 CEOs I was talking to, where I challenged them to just take 2 minutes and everybody shut up and be quiet. And for 2 minutes, I wanted them to think about why they got the last big deal they got. And they had their heads down, and you could see their heads pop up, and the recognition in their eyes as it came to them. And out of that 15 people, at least 10 or 11 of them with just 2 minutes of total silence. Now, that sounds like such a short time. If people tried that in their day to get 2 minutes of just thinking about one thing, they can figure out what it was about their product offering that offered the best value to that customer at that time that caused them to get that bid. Maybe it was nothing about their product. Might have been they just liked them. Might have been a relationship. Might have been circumstantial. Maybe the competitor just did something that offended the customer.
Or a customer, or a user, yeah.
But the key is that once you understand that, it's like a sports team finding a weakness in an opponent and exploiting it again and again. As soon as you figure that out, do it again until somebody stops you. Value is the ultimate determinant, but if people would just sit down and say, let me think about why I got that job. Why did I get that contract? Honestly, no threats.
John, could we then say that it is what arguably called the unique value proposition, or the value that there is in the offer? Well,
I believe it helps to understand why people decide on value if you break it down to just 5 things. I like 5 things because I never lose my hand. I can always keep notes on it. People want good quality things. They want to do what it's supposed to do. They want good service. They want it when they want it. If they don't have it then, it's no good. They want to get it fast these days and easy. So that's speed and convenience. They want low cost, but they also want uniqueness, innovation, or cachet. Otherwise, nobody would ever buy a Mont Blanc pen. You can buy a whole box of Bic pens for the same as 1 Mont Blanc refill. So if you take those 5 attributes of value and get a person to think about what it was about each of those, you can usually zero in. I use an example in the book of a Rolex and a Timex wristwatch. And it's easy to draw a plot of why you buy them.
yeah, you got the Rolex, I got the Timex.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, I have
And we have the same time.
I have a fossil, but never mind. The point is, you can actually, I did a polar diagram where you can actually plot these and it creates a unique shape, and the shape of value, as I call it, points at the primary reason you bought it. In the case of the Timex, it's cost. In the case of the Rolex, it's style, it's cachet, it shows you as being a person of prestige. And if you can get people to understand what value is, and if you can get your customers talking about what value is, it helps you understand that why question much better. If you can get the customer talking about how you compare to the other offerings, you can find weaknesses, you can find places that you're strong, you can find things to build on. Many times, we just don't bother to ask. We just assume that we know these things. Sometimes, the best thing you do is ask a question and then shut up and listen.
Wouldn't it be that people don't know what value is?
Everybody thinks they know what value is.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
And if you have a room full of 200 people and you ask them to hold their wrists up with their wristwatch on it, it's rare to find more than even 2 that are alike. Which means among all those people, they all chose different, uniquely different values in their wristwatch. And you can always trace it back down to those 5 attributes. They bought it because it was a good wristwatch. They bought it because they knew that they wanted one that lasted a long time. Or they just needed a watch fast.
Yeah.
Or it was cheap, and it didn't matter if it hurt, if they lost it or broke it, or they wanted one that said, I'm a person of some importance. And once you break it down to those factors, you can get all the people in a room, or most of them, on one page about what value is. They have heard it, they can disagree about it, but that same picture will be in their mind. And that's the first step to then creating it. Because we know that getting people to agree on anything is not easy. But getting good people to agree on something like defining value is critically important. And then when you engage the customer, now you ask questions in a whole new way.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, John, because you have to get in, people become involved with your company and the marketing process and things like that. So you have to be in contact all the time, letting people talk to you, listen to you. You have to listen to your customers, and that's something difficult to do because I don't know why most companies don't realize it, or if they realize it, they don't do it, and they want to be successful without that, and that's why you wrote The Profitable Growth, because, you know, it has to be that way.
Here's a perfect example of what you just spoke about. This is my iPhone. Now,
Is that 4 or 5?
this is the 4S. I don't have the 5 yet. This is the 4S. Now, think about a company named BlackBerry. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, BlackBerry dominated this market with their phones with the little keyboards on them.
Yes.
Now they're struggling for their life. Why? Well, because competition changed the picture of value. The first thing you have to understand is value is defined in the mind of the user. So you have to understand in the mind of the user what's valuable. That's part of that, why did you win the last big deal? Second, you have to understand that it never stands still. It's a constantly shifting target. In fact, one of my oldest books is called Shapeshifters, and I talk about value and how it's constantly shifting. BlackBerry didn't keep up. Apple brought this in. Then to fight them, Motorola and was acquired and created Droid with Google.
Mm-hmm.
Then Samsung came in with the Galaxy 3. This is a constantly moving target. And if you understand which of those attributes are causing the decision, price of the phone quickly became no longer the issue. It was functionality, speed, convenience, and some style, status. You mean you have an old one? You asked me what model of phone I had. It's human nature.
It is like that, absolutely right. But then we have to leave, you know, we have to go now because we're running out of time, but we'll continue next week, okay?
That's great.
All right. Vamos entonces a dejar por hoy aquí y vamos a continuar la próxima semana, porque se nos acabó el tiempo. Pero ya ustedes ven cómo es hablar con John Mariotti. Y por eso los invitamos a que estén pendientes de la continuidad de nuestra serie internacional. Por el momento, muchísimas gracias y una feliz noche. Muy buenas noches, yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa y esta es la serie internacional 2013 de Tiempo de Mercadeo. Uno de los consultores más afamados del mundo es John Mariotti. Él acaba de escribir un libro señalando la ruta que deben seguir las organizaciones para crecer de manera rentable y exitosa. Por eso hemos seleccionado el tema de qué se debe hacer en mercadeo con una hoja de ruta como la que John Mariotti nos enseña en su último libro. Esto lo haremos con el autor dentro de unos segundos cuando regresemos. Ya volvemos.
Growth, consumers don't spend as much, companies don't spend as much. So if I can help people find profitable growth and show them the way to it, then they can start spending again, and every time they spend, taxes go into the government, the economy grows, the deficit gets smaller. When there's no growth, the reverse happens.
That's easy to say, John, and that's what has been said throughout the years. What's new in this book that hasn't been said yet?
I discovered...
John, good evening. Welcome back to my program. It's nice to have you after all these years.
It's a pleasure, isn't it? Time really flies, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's been how many years since we met?
Since we met, probably 10.
Yeah, just about.
You're older now.
Oh, yeah. You're younger.
Yeah, no, not really.
Well, John, you just wrote a book, and let me tell the viewers what the book is. John, What's new in this book? Because you say that whatever you say here is going to save the U.S. economy. How is that going to be?
In the United States, the economy is made up almost 75% of consumer spending, consumption, and corporate spending. And the problem the United States has had, along with a lot of other countries lately, is no growth. When there's no